You just finished submitting your primaries and now you want to be able to know how to write your secondaries. Perhaps some questions you ask yourself are, how can you prepare yourself to separate yourself from the rest of the applicants by writing great secondaries? You're also maybe asking, what will help me stand out so that I can secure an interview at an earlier time frame or at an earlier period of the cycle? So I'm going to give you a few tips on how to write a great secondaries so that you can get interviews for your application cycle. Alright, the first tip I have, and is pretty obvious, is answer the question how it's actually presented in the secondary question. So don't try to overcomplicate anything. Don't try to write stuff that not quite answer the question. Just get straight to the point and answer it to the best ability. Oftentimes they're going to try to critique you based on how well you answer that question. And if you answer the question that is not even related to the topic, then it's going to not affect you well, and it might decrease your chances of getting accepted. So just make sure you get straight to the point and answer the question as prompted. Alright, so my second tip is to try to allow someone to see your secondaries before you actually submit your secondaries to your medical schools. So a good person to try to allow to look over your essays could be people who either worked in the admission process or someone who went through the admission process before. So a few examples could be current medical students or even incoming medical students that went through the admission process at least once. Another good option is to have someone who is very good at writing so that they can sort of see your style errors or grammar errors and see mistakes that you perhaps didn't get to see when you're editing your essays. So I think those are two good. Alright, you already heard this in probably previous videos, but my third tip is to try to tie the mission statement to your answers in secondaries. Now this is very important because schools want to see whether you fit in with the mission or not. Ultimately, the reason why you go into a Pacific medical school is they want to be able to see how can you actually contribute to the school itself and how you can be able to uplift its mission statement each day you're at that medical school. So they want to be able to see that you can impact the community and be surrounded by the community as well. So being able to participate in different activities or be able to serve in underserved areas, that will be able to sort of show, okay, this student is actually contributing to our mission statement at this school. So what I'll try to do is try to make connections between the mission statement and your personal experiences. And if you're struggling in doing this for a Pacific school, then perhaps maybe applying to that medical school isn't the best decision. So I think that's one of the most important tips for sure, is being able to see whether you can connect the mission statement to your personal experiences. And this actually leads right to my fourth tip, is being able to bring in as many personal experiences as possible to your secondaries. They want to be able to see your personality. So they don't want to see you as some monotone robot who, you know, only did the classes or only did this specific activity. They want to be able to see that the student actually, you know, done something outside the classroom and also had a multi-array of activities that not only you want to participate in, but also you're able to make a long-lasting impact, and also being able to see some type of growth and lesson learned in those activities. So what I'll try to do is, whenever you have a personal experience, try to have a short anecdote and then try to have some type of small lesson that you learn, and then how that can make you a great medical student at that specific school. This will actually help medical students understand your experiences, not just for the responsibilities, but also for the impact and the lesson you gain from that experience. Alright, my next tip is that if you feel like you can't answer the secondaries right away, then it's completely fine to leave it for a day or two, just to see and reflect your thoughts and sort of see how you can approach a secondary. Now, if you can't think about it in longer than 2 to 3 days or even a week, then again, perhaps this is probably not a school you should be applying to, as your answers or your secondaries might come up as not genuine. So again, this is why it's very important to apply to schools that you could see yourself going to, and also that you're connected to the mission statement of that school. So you definitely want to be able to apply to schools that you have a good connection with the mission statement. But again, if you feel like you need that little break to sort of think about your answers, then it's okay to take a day or two break. And again, if you still try to answer a question or answer the secondaries of a school that you don't quite fit in with that mission statement, schools will see that you don't quite fit in with that. So I would say don't force it if you can't connect with that mission statement. But if you feel like you can, but you can't answer the question at the moment, then it's okay to take that 1 or 2 day break. So the next tip I have, this is a pretty underrated tip, so I definitely recommend anyone to use it, and it's to create secondary answers for the common secondary prompts. So some examples of these common secondary prompts can be diversity, adversity, challenge, feedback, leadership, etc. And this is extremely helpful because based on the secondaries you write, you can sort of use that as a baseline and then add a few tweaks or a few things based on that specific school. So it won't feel like you're actually writing that entire essay, you're just writing some of it or a little bit of it. And this will get easier as you have more secondaries and as you answer more secondaries. So what I did is that I made 2 versions of these secondaries. I made a 250 word one and I made a 500 word one. Now you may be asking, why did I do that? Well, it's because some schools have shorter secondary essays and some schools have longer secondary essays. So when doing this, you can be able to use that specific one for a school's sort of word limit, and you can sort of adjust from there instead of again adding more words. For example, if you're using a 250 word essay that you created a while ago and the school requires a 500 word essay, they probably want to add a few more words, right? So I think having those 2 versions helps a lot so that you could be able to just use one of them and then adjust as needed. And a few areas I looked for this common secondary prompts were on Reddit, and now I'm not sure if I'm saying the other source right, but I also used something called Sheminson Consultant. Hopefully that sounds right, but if it doesn't, let me know how it's pronounced. But that's the other resource I use. I'll link both below, and those 2 resources definitely helped me to create good secondary answers for those common secondary prompts. Now, this next tip is definitely take breaks when needed. And the reason why I'm saying this is that when you submit those primaries, you're gonna have maybe a 5-10 minute break, maybe even more depending on how early you submit your primaries. But essentially you're gonna have a few days to sort of recuperate and think about your secondary answers before actually starting writing secondaries and the secondaries coming into your email. So sometimes if you're applying to a lot of schools, there can be quite a lot of essays because on average most schools are going to have an average of like 5 to 7 short answer questions, and with that can add up if you're applying to like 20 or 30 or even 40 schools. So it's definitely okay to take breaks because you want to be able to think of a very good answer instead of rushing it. And I always like to say it's better to have a quality answer and take more time to have a sort of like not a good answer but you rush it. And it's definitely hard to stay motivated because of the amount of secondary answers you write in. So that's another good reason to take breaks, and it sort of can act as a reward for finishing secondaries each time. And another thing I did is that I always try to have something to do for the weekend so that again I can feel recharged for the next week of writing secondaries. And I'm gonna use myself as an example. So when I was doing the application process, I was still working as an exercise physiologist, and even though it was pretty flexible in the hours I can do, it was still hard because I still had to go home and write these secondary essays. So I always try to have something planned for the end of the week so that I didn't feel like I was burning out. Alright, my next tip is to definitely proofread everything before I submit. And I would say this is important to proofread because you want to catch any mistakes that you made after you submit your secondary and be like, oh, I should have edited that out. So I would definitely try to read everything, like everything in secondaries, make sure everything is good. And again, because once you submit that secondary, it's pretty hard to edit it, so you don't want to again catch a mistake that you didn't get to catch before. And this is actually a mistake that a lot of high school students would do when applying to colleges, is to have the wrong school for a school secondary. So that will probably be an automatic rejection because there's like thousands of students who did make a mistake, and there's no reason why they should stop you when you made that mistake for other students who didn't make that mistake. So definitely I would say read everything when you have a fresh mind so that you don't have any mistakes. Alright, my next tip is definitely to create a spreadsheet for all your schools you're applying to. This is another tip that I mentioned from another video, but being able to create a spreadsheet will help you first of all see what schools you're applying to, but also help you when you receive the secondary and when you submit the secondary. And it sort of keeps a good track line of how quickly you're applying these secondaries. And in the next tip I will tell you sort of the time frame to submit these secondaries. But ultimately it helps you keep organized, and it also can help you organize information in terms of obviously your password and your username when you make the secondary, but also the time you receive a secondary and the time you submit the secondary. Alright, my last tip is to try to get secondaries in within the 2-week time frame. Now, when I was applying to schools, I always heard a rule, okay, you should be submitting secondaries by 14 days or around 2 weeks. Now, the whole goal of doing that is to show interest to those schools and say, okay, I'm actually seriously applying to this school and I really want to go to this school. Also, a good reason to submit it within those 2 weeks is the application process is rolling admission, and as you know, rolling admission is basically when there's no specific time frame of like when to get interviews, when you can get acceptances. It's sort of like it's going in order of who's submitting these primary and secondaries first, and then who's getting these interviews first, and then who's getting those acceptances first. So you want to be able to submit as early as possible, of course with the highest quality as possible, so that you can give yourself the best chance to get accepted. So with more admissions, there's going to be more offers in the beginning of the application cycle than at the end of the application cycle. But again, if you take a little bit long, 2 weeks, in order to have a more quality secondary essay, then that's fine. But what I'm saying is that you should not be taking your sweet time and trying to be lazy about it. You want to be able to still be prompt and try to get these secondaries done at time. And the reason why you want to get in those 2 weeks is that anything time longer, and that could maybe decrease chances of not getting accepted. Another reason could be that, and basically decrease your chances, you're not going to be able to get rid of it unless perhaps if you have a very priced application, whether that's very high stats or just some other X factor. So basically just try to submit those with 2 weeks and have the highest quality of essays as much as possible. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like it, please make sure to share with other people, as well as comment down below if any of you guys are current applicants, where you guys are currently on the application process, and what other videos you want to see from the application process. But we'll say that probably videos I have next is most likely be interviews, of course dealing with acceptances perhaps, and also I want to definitely make a video on how my application process was, so that you can sort of see a perspective of how my application process went. So thank you guys for watching, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.